Professor Zethkar walked into his classroom at Nexus University like he did every week. His six thin arms carried data tablets and holographic projectors, while his crystal-like skin caught the morning light. The classroom filled with the usual mix of alien students. Florian students swayed gently on their root-like feet, their green leaves rustling softly. The insect-like cricks clicked their mandibles in quiet conversation. Ethereal students floated near the ceiling as glowing clouds of gas. A few Valthurian students like himself sat in the front rows, their crystal bodies reflecting light in different colors. Today was special. Professor Zethkar loved teaching about mythical creatures because the stories were so wild and impossible. He activated his holographic display and smiled at his students. The image showed a bipedal creature with pale skin, dark hair, and two simple eyes. Today we discuss the legendary humans, he began. His voice made soft clicking sounds that the universal translators converted into words each species could understand. These creatures supposedly lived on a death world called Earth. The stories claim they survived by doing impossible things. Young Florian named Petal raised one of her vine-like arms. Professor, what made their world so dangerous? Zethkar's crystal body flickered with excitement. Everything. Their planet had extreme weather that could freeze or burn living things in hours. Massive storms with winds that could destroy buildings. Wild animals with teeth and claws designed to kill. Poisonous plants everywhere. The very air contained elements that would kill most civilized species. The students made various sounds of disbelief. A crick student named Chirp clicked rapidly. How could any creature survive such a place? According to the myths, humans thrived there, Zethkar continued. They supposedly ate toxic substances. For pleasure. They consumed a poison called alcohol that would damage most nervous systems. They deliberately hurt their own bodies through something called exercise to make themselves stronger. The stories even claim they formed emotional bonds with dangerous predators and kept them as companions. Several students laughed. The idea seemed too ridiculous to believe. Zethkar brought up another hologram showing a human holding what looked like a four-legged creature with sharp teeth. Look at this image from the old Earth databases. They called these beasts dogs. Predators with powerful jaws that could easily kill a human child. Yet humans supposedly lived with them, fed them, and even let them sleep in their homes. An ethereal student named Whisper condensed slightly to speak. The emotional attachment behavior sounds impossible. No logical species would bond with random creatures. The myths get stranger, Zethkar said, clearly enjoying himself. Humans allegedly practice something called pack bonding. They would adopt any creature they met and try to protect it. Stories tell of humans caring for injured enemies, feeding wild animals, and even risking their lives for creatures they had never seen before. The professor switched to another image showing groups of humans working together. They supposedly had no natural armor, no claws, no venom, no mental powers. Just soft skin that could be easily damaged. Yet they became the dominant species. On their death world through cooperation and stubborn refusal to give up. A Valthurian student named Lyra asked, "What happened to them? Why are they mythical now?" Zethkar's crystal body dimmed slightly. The records are unclear. Their planet was destroyed in some kind of disaster thousands of years ago. No humans have been seen in our galaxy for so long that most scholars believe they never existed at all. The stories were probably created by ancient civilizations to teach lessons about courage and determination. Just as he said this, the classroom door made its usual soft whooshing sound as it slid open. Everyone expected another late student to hurry in with apologies. Instead, a bipedal figure in a blue work suit stepped through the doorway. The creature had pale skin with small patches of hair on its arms. The dark hair covered the top of its head. Two eyes, just two simple eyes, looked around the room with what seemed like confusion. It carried a metal box with tools sticking out of it. The being looked exactly like the holograms Professor Zethkar had been showing, down to the soft appearance and lack of natural weapons. Complete silence filled the classroom. Not one student moved or made a sound. Professor Zethkar felt his crystal structure beginning to flicker through different colors, something that only happened when he was extremely shocked or afraid. The creature looked around the room and seemed to notice all the staring faces. It spoke in a soft voice that somehow the translators could understand perfectly. "Excuse me, I think I got lost down in the maintenance tunnels. Could someone point me towards section C7? I need to fix an air filter up there." Several of the cricks? Students began making high-pitched clicking sounds of panic. 2 Florian students started releasing stress spores that made the air cloudy. The ethereal students began condensing into tight, defensive formations near the ceiling, but the creature, the impossible creature that looked exactly like the mythical humans from the legends, just stood there looking polite and slightly embarrassed. It seemed completely unaware that it had just walked into a classroom full of aliens who had been discussing why its entire species was impossible. Professor Zethkar stared at the being, his mind trying to process what he was seeing. According to everything he had studied and taught, humans were extinct myths. Yet here stood a perfect example of one asking for directions. Like it was the most normal thing in the galaxy. The human looked concerned as the panic in the room grew worse. "Is everything okay? Did I interrupt something important?" That simple question, asked with genuine worry for others, sent another wave of shock through the classroom. According to the legends, this was exactly the kind of behavior humans were supposed to show. Care for others, even complete strangers, even when they themselves might be in danger. Professor Zethkar realized he was looking at either the most elaborate hoax in galactic history or he was face to face with a living, breathing example of everything he had been teaching was impossible. His academic mind began racing with questions while his survival instincts screamed at him to run from the legendary predator species. The human shifted his weight from one foot to the other and adjusted his grip on his toolbox, waiting patiently for someone to answer his simple request for directions. The panic in the classroom got worse by the second. Professor Zethkar watched as his orderly academic environment turned into chaos. The crick students were chittering so loudly that their translators could not keep up with the rapid clicks and whistles. The Florian students released more stress spores, making the air thick and green. Some of the smaller aliens tried to hide behind their desks. Jake Collins stood in the doorway, completely confused by the reaction. He had been working in the maintenance tunnels below the university for 3 hours, trying to trace a problem with the air circulation system. All he wanted was directions back to his work area. Instead, he had walked into what looked like a panic attack happening to an entire classroom. The human took a step forward, and several students screamed. A young Valthurian named Lyra began shaking so hard that her crystal body made ringing sounds. Her breathing became fast and shallow, and her natural crystal glow started flickering on and off rapidly. Jake recognized the signs immediately. He had seen panic attacks before when his neighbor's daughter had them during thunderstorms. Without thinking about the strange appearance of the students or the bizarre situation, his protective instincts kicked in. "Hey, it's okay," he said, softly walking toward Lyra while ignoring the fresh wave of panic his movement caused. "You're having a panic attack. I can help with that." Professor Zethkar watched in amazement and terror as the legendary human approached one of his students. Every story about human pack bonding behavior said they would immediately try to help any creature in distress, even complete strangers. He had taught this as an impossible myth for years. Now he was watching it happen right in front of him. Jake knelt down next to Lyra's desk, moving slowly and keeping his voice calm. "My name is Jake. Can you tell me your name?" Lyra's translator stuttered as she tried to speak through her panic. Lyra," she managed. "That's a pretty name, Lyra. Now I want you to listen to my voice and try to breathe with me, okay? We're going to slow down your breathing." Jake demonstrated by taking a long, slow breath in through his nose, then letting it out through his mouth. "Breathe in for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now out for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. The rest of the class watched in stunned silence as their classmate began to calm down. Jake continued the breathing exercise, speaking in gentle, encouraging tones. He did not touch Lyra or make any sudden movements. He just sat patiently and helped her work through the panic attack. That's perfect, Lyra. You're doing great. The scary feeling will pass. It always does. Just keep breathing with me. Professor Zethkar felt his own crystal structure stabilizing as he watched this impossible scene. The human was showing exactly the kind of behavior the ancient texts described. Immediate protection and care for a stranger in distress. No concern for his own safety or convenience. Just pure, instinctive kindness. After a few minutes, Lyra's breathing returned to normal. Her crystal body stopped flickering and began glowing with a steady, soft light again. She looked up at Jake with wonder and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "How did you know how to help me?" Jake smiled and his whole face changed. The expression was warm and genuine. Nothing like the predatory look the other students had expected from a legendary Death World creature. "My neighbor's kid gets panic attacks sometimes. Once you know the breathing trick, it's pretty easy to help." He stood up and looked around the classroom, finally seeming to notice how strange the situation was. Dozens of alien faces stared back at him. Some were still showing fear, but most now looked curious and confused. "I'm sorry for interrupting your class," Jake said to Professor Zethkar. "I really do need to get back to work, though. That air system won't fix itself." Professor Zethkar found his voice after several attempts. "You are human." It was not a question. "Yeah, that's right. Jake Collins, Maintenance Division. I started working here about a month ago." Jake held out his hand in what looked like some kind of greeting gesture. "And you are?" The simple, friendly introduction sent another wave of shock through the room. Professor Zethkar stared at the extended hand, not sure what to do with it. According to the legends, humans used physical contact as a form of social bonding. The idea terrified and fascinated him at the same time. "I am Professor Zethkar," he managed to say. "I teach about mythical creatures." Jake looked around the room again, taking in the diverse collection of alien species. "Cool. What kind of mythical creatures?" The innocent question made several students start laughing, though it sounded more like hysteria than humor. Professor Zethkar felt like his entire academic career was crumbling around him. "We were discussing humans, actually," he said weakly. Jake's eyebrows went up in surprise. "Really? That's interesting. What do you teach about us?" The casual use of the word us made Professor Zethkar's crystal body flicker again. Jake was not just a human. He was a human who seemed completely comfortable being around aliens, treating it like the most normal thing in the galaxy. The old texts describe humans as legendary warriors from a death world, Professor Zethkar began carefully. "They say your species had impossible abilities, pack bonding with random creatures, surviving in conditions that would kill most species, enduring pain and hardship without complaint." Jake listened politely, nodding along. "I guess some of that sounds right. We do tend to adopt stray animals a lot. And Earth was pretty rough compared to most places I've seen since joining the galactic community." The matter-of-fact way Jake confirmed the legends as simple truth made Professor Zethkar feel dizzy. He had spent his entire career studying these stories as myths, and now a living example was standing in his classroom talking about them like they were boring facts. The texts also claim humans would form protective bonds with any creature they encountered, Professor Zethkar said, watching Jake's face carefully. "Even complete strangers from different species." Jake glanced over at Lyra, who was still watching him with fascination. "Well, sure, if someone needs help, you help them. Doesn't matter what they look like or where they're from? That's just basic decency." That simple statement hit the classroom like a physical force. The idea that helping strangers was just basic decency, not some legendary heroic behavior, challenged everything they had learned about the nature of civilization. And survival. Jake checked something on his wrist that looked like a timepiece. "Look, I really do need to get back to work. The air circulation system has been running rough all morning, and I promised the facilities manager I'd have it fixed by lunch." He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at Lyra. "You okay now?" Those panic attacks can be pretty rough. Lyra nodded, her crystal body glowing brighter with what might have been happiness. I'm much better. Thank you, Jake. No problem. Take care of yourself. Jake gave the class a friendly wave and started toward the door again. Professor Zethkar realized he was about to lose the greatest discovery in academic history. Wait, he called out. Would you mind staying for a few minutes? My students would be very interested to hear about human culture. Jake stopped and looked back with a smile. Sure, I can spare a few minutes. The air system isn't going anywhere. Jake set his toolbox down near the door and looked around the classroom with genuine interest. The panic had mostly faded, replaced by intense curiosity from the alien students. Professor Zethkar quickly dimmed the holographic displays that had been showing images of humans, feeling somewhat embarrassed about the timing. So what would you like to know? Jake asked, settling into a relaxed posture that somehow made him seem less threatening to the nervous students, a brave Crick student. Nain Chirp raised one of her thin arms. The legends say humans consume toxic substances for pleasure. Is that true? Jake laughed, a sound that was surprisingly warm and musical to alien ears. I guess that depends on what you consider toxic. I had coffee this morning and that stuff is pretty much poison to most species I've met. But yeah, we drink it because we like how it tastes and it helps us wake up. Professor Zethkar's crystal body flickered with excitement. Coffee contains alkaloids that would cause organ failure. In most civilized species, you consume this voluntarily? Every morning, Jake confirmed cheerfully. Sometimes 3 or 4 cups if it's been a long night. My wife Lisa makes fun of me because I get grumpy if I don't have my coffee. The casual mention of having a mate sent whispers through the classroom. According to the legends, human pair bonding was supposed to be incredibly strong, but hearing it mentioned so naturally made it seem real in a way the textbooks never had. Petal. The young Florian rustled her leaves nervously before asking, what about the pack bonding behavior? Do you really form attachments to random creatures? Jake's face lit up with enthusiasm. Oh yeah, absolutely. Want to see some pictures? He pulled out a small device that projected holographic images into the air above his palm. The first image showed Jake standing next to a female human with long brown hair. Both were smiling at the camera. This is my wife Lisa. We've been married for 8 years now. The next image showed a smaller human with Jake's dark hair and Lisa's brown eyes. This is our daughter Emma. She's 6 years old and obsessed with learning about alien cultures. She'd love to meet you guys. But the images that followed sent the classroom into stunned silence. Jake showed picture after picture of himself with various earth animals. 3 large, furry creatures with tongues hanging out of their mouths. 2 smaller, sleek animals with pointed ears and long tails. Even a picture of Jake feeding what looked like a wild creature with a striped tail and mask-like markings around its eyes. These are our rescue dogs, Jake explained, pointing to the large animals. Rex, Bruno, and Daisy. We found them all abandoned or injured and brought them home. And these are our cats, Shadow and Whiskers. The little guy with the mask is Bandit. He's not exactly a pet, but he shows up in our yard every night for dinner. Professor Zethkar stared at the images in amazement. You voluntarily share your living space with predators? Predators? Jake looked confused for a moment, then laughed again. I guess dogs were predators originally, but they've been our companions for thousands of years. They're not dangerous to us anymore, well, except for the slobber. Bruno drools. On everything. A young Valthurian student asked, but why do you feed the wild one? What benefit does it provide? Jake's expression became thoughtful. Bandit doesn't provide any benefit, I guess. He was just hungry and he looked like he needed help, so now I leave food out for him every night. It makes me happy to know he's getting enough to eat. The concept of helping another creature simply because it made them happy was so alien to most of the students that several translators struggled to find equivalent concepts in their languages. Whisper, the ethereal student, condensed into a more solid form to speak clearly. The texts mention human endurance abilities, something called pain tolerance. I suppose we're pretty tough. Jake said with a shrug. Emma had the flu last winter, and I stayed awake for 3 days straight taking care of her. Lisa kept telling me to get some sleep, but I wanted to make sure Emma was okay. Professor Zethkar's crystal structure began flickering rapidly. You remained conscious and functional for 72 hours straight? It wasn't that bad? Parents do stuff like that all the time. My grandfather used to tell stories about walking 15 miles through a blizzard to get medicine for my grandmother when she was sick. That's real toughness. The casual way Jake dismissed what would be considered superhuman endurance by galactic standards made the students exchange amazed glances. To him, staying awake for 3 days to care for a sick child was just normal parenting. Lyra, who had been quiet since her panic attack, finally spoke up. Jake, why did you help me earlier? You didn't know me, and I probably looked pretty scary. When I was panicking, Jake's face showed genuine confusion. Scary? You looked upset and scared. When someone's having a panic attack, you help them. It doesn't matter if they're human or alien or anything else. Everyone deserves to feel safe. The simple statement hit the classroom like a physical force. Professor Zethkar felt his entire understanding of interspecies relations shifting. According to everything he had been taught, different species help their own kind and remain neutral or suspicious toward others. The idea that someone would automatically offer aid to any distressed creature, regardless of species, was revolutionary. Chirp clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. But what if helping them put you in danger? What if I had been a threat to you? Jake considered this seriously. I guess I'd cross that bridge when I come to it, but in my experience, most people aren't threats. They're just people trying to get through their day, same as me. Professor Zethkar found himself asking, the legends describe humans as warriors from a death world. Yet you seem remarkably peaceful. Earth was pretty rough, Jake admitted. Lots of natural disasters, dangerous wildlife, extreme weather. But that just meant we had to learn to work together and help each other out. You can't survive a place like that by fighting everyone you meet. You survive by making friends and taking care of each other, he gestured around the classroom. Same. Principle applies here. Galaxy's a big, complicated place. Better to make friends than enemies. A soft chime sounded from Jake's wrist device. He glanced at it and sighed. That's my supervisor. I really do need to get back to work now. The air system won't fix itself, and people are depending on me to get it running properly. As he stood up and reached for his toolbox, Petal asked one final question. Jake, what's the most important thing about being human? Jake paused, thinking carefully about his answer. I guess it's remembering that everyone else is just trying to figure things out too. Doesn't matter what species they are or where they come from. We're all just doing our best to take care of the people we love and maybe help a few strangers along the way. He shouldered his toolbox and headed toward the door. Thanks for letting me visit your class, Professor. It was really interesting to hear what people think about humans. As Jake reached the door, he turned back one more time. Oh, and Lyra? If you ever want to talk about dealing with panic attacks or anything else, just send me a message. I work night shifts anyway, so I'm usually awake. With that simple offer of friendship to a complete stranger from a different species, Jake Collins walked out of the classroom, leaving behind a group of aliens whose understanding of the universe had been fundamentally changed in the span of 30 minutes. Jake made it about halfway to the door before a loud grinding noise echoed through the classroom. The environmental control system that had been running quietly in the background suddenly started making concerning mechanical sounds. The air circulation. Fans stuttered, and a warning light began flashing on the wall panel. Jake stopped immediately, his head tilting as he listened to the mechanical distress. His maintenance instincts kicked in, and he set his toolbox down again. Professor, how long has your air system been making that noise? He asked, already moving toward the wall panel to examine the controls. Professor Zethkar's crystal body flickered with confusion. It started making unusual sounds about a week ago. The university's maintenance AI classified it as a minor issue requiring scheduled replacement of the entire unit. Jake studied the control panel, running his fingers along the edges to feel for vibrations. Mind if I take a look at the actual system? That grinding sound means something's wearing wrong. And if it fails completely, you'll have some pretty unhappy students in here. The professor gestured toward a maintenance access panel near the ceiling. Please, if you think you can help. The repair schedule shows the replacement won't happen for another month. Jake opened his toolbox and pulled out what looked like a simple handheld device. He held it up toward the ceiling and it began making soft beeping sounds. Sonic scanner, he explained to the curious students. Helps me see what's going on inside the walls without tearing everything apart. Chirp leaned forward in fascination. Your species developed advanced diagnostic tools? Not really, Jake said with a grin. I bought this from a Zentarian trader. For 20 credits. But the basic principles are the same whether you're fixing a starship or a ceiling fan. Something's not moving the way it should, so we figure out what and fix it. He climbed onto a desk to reach the access panel, ignoring the gasps from students who thought he might fall. With practiced efficiency, Jake removed the panel cover and peered into the mechanical space beyond. There's the problem, he said, pointing into the darkness. The main circulation pump is trying to work, but something's blocking the intake. Probably been building up for weeks. Professor Zethkar floated closer to look. The AI said the entire system needed replacement. Surely a simple blockage wouldn't cause such complex problems? Jake chuckled as he reached into his toolbox for more equipment. AIs are great at complex problems, but sometimes they overthink simple ones. They see multiple system errors and assume everything's broken. Humans are better at asking, what's the simplest thing that could cause all these symptoms? He pulled out a flexible cable with a small camera attached to one end. The device projected images onto his handheld scanner as he fed it into the air system. Bingo, Jake said, showing the display to nearby students. The image showed the intake completely clogged with what looked like fabric and debris. Looks like someone's laundry got sucked into the system. Probably during one of those big windstorms last month. The students watched in amazement as Jake began extracting the blockage using nothing but basic tools and creative problem-solving. He fashioned a hook from spare wire, used his sonic scanner to locate the exact position of the debris, and worked with patient determination to clear the obstruction. The interesting thing about humans, Jake said as he worked, is that we're really good at making things work even when we don't have the right tools. We call it improvisation. Professor Zethkar was frantically taking notes on his data tablet. This problem-solving approach is not covered in any of our engineering protocols. That's because your protocols assume you have proper equipment and ideal conditions. Jake replied, pulling a large chunk of fabric from the air intake. Humans learn to fix things in bad weather with broken tools in the dark while being chased by predators. You learn to make do with whatever's available. As he continued working, something went wrong. Jake reached too far into the mechanical space and his hand contacted a hot metal pipe. The sound he made was sharp and immediate, a quick intake of breath that the universal translators conveyed as pain. Several students cried out in alarm as Jake quickly pulled his hand back. A patch of skin on his palm was red and obviously burned. Jake, you're injured, Lyra said, her crystal body glowing with concern. Should we call medical assistance? Jake looked at his hand with the casual assessment of someone who had been hurt before. It's not too bad. Just a minor burn. He walked to the water dispenser in the corner of the classroom and ran cold water over the injury. Professor Zethkar stared in amazement. That injury would require immediate medical attention for most species. The pain alone would be incapacitating. Pangs. Just information, Jake said matter-of-factly, wrapping his hand in a clean cloth from his toolbox. It tells you something's wrong, but it doesn't stop you from doing what needs to be done. The casual way he dismissed what would be a significant injury to most galactic species left the student speechless. Jake simply dried his hand, checked to make sure the bandage was secure, and went back to work on the air system. Besides, he added, reaching back into the mechanical space, this needs to get fixed. You can't have students trying to learn in bad air, and the replacement won't be here for a month. Better to deal with a little pain now than let everyone suffer later. This Simple statement perfectly demonstrated what Professor Zethkar had been teaching about human protective instincts. Jake was voluntarily enduring injury to ensure the comfort of complete strangers from species he had met less than an hour ago, with the main blockage cleared. Jake began the delicate work of realigning the intake mechanisms. He had to fashion a temporary support bracket from spare metal strips, jerry-rig a connection using wire from his scanner, and somehow balance 3 different mechanical components while securing them in place. "This is what we call a human solution," Jake explained. As he worked, "It's not pretty, it's not permanent, but it'll work until someone can do it properly." The final step required Jake to hold 2 heavy components in place while connecting them with his injured hand. The students watched in fascination as he gritted his teeth against the pain and completed the repair through sheer determination. When Jake finally climbed down from the ceiling, the grinding noise had stopped completely. The air circulation system hummed quietly and efficiently, moving fresh air through the classroom better than it had in weeks. "That should hold for a few months at least," Jake said, packing his tools back into his toolbox. "When the replacement parts arrive, the installation will be easier because the system's running properly now." Professor Zethkar looked at his environmental readouts in amazement. "The air quality has improved by 30%. The temperature regulation is more stable. How did you accomplish this with simple tools and improvised parts?" Jake shouldered his toolbox and checked his wrist device again. "Like I said, humans are good at making things work. We had to be growing up on Earth." As he headed toward the door for the second time, Whisper the Ethereal called out, "Jake, why did you continue working after you were injured?" Logic would suggest stopping to seek medical treatment. Jake paused at the doorway and looked back at the classroom full of curious alien faces. "Because you needed clean air more than I needed a perfect hand. That's just how humans are built, I guess. We take care of each other first, worry about ourselves second." With that final demonstration of the legendary human protective instinct, Jake Collins walked out of the classroom, leaving behind a group of aliens who now understood that everything they had dismissed as mythology was not only real, but beautifully, impossibly human. The silence that followed Jake's departure lasted for several long minutes. Professor Zethkar stood at the front of his classroom, staring at the doorway where the impossible had just walked out as casually as it had walked in. His crystal body cycled through different colors as his mind struggled to process what had just happened. Around the classroom, students sat in various states of shock and wonder. The Crick students had stopped their nervous chittering. The Florian students swayed gently without releasing stress spores. Even the ethereal students had condensed into more solid forms, as if they needed physical presence to anchor themselves to this new reality. Lyra was the first to break the silence. "Professor, everything we just saw matched the legends exactly. The pack bonding behavior, the pain tolerance, the protective instincts, the improvised problem solving." But Jake made it all seem so normal. Professor Zethkar looked down at his data tablet, where he had been frantically taking notes during Jake's visit. Pages of observations about human behavior, direct quotes, and technical details about their problem-solving methods. His entire academic career had been built on the assumption that these behaviors were myths created by ancient civilizations to inspire courage and cooperation. Now he had first-hand evidence that not only were the legends true, but they understated the reality of human nature. "That's perhaps the most remarkable thing about this encounter," he said slowly. "Jake displayed every impossible trait we've studied, but to him, none of it was remarkable. Helping a stranger having a panic attack was just basic decency. Working through injury to fix our air system was just doing his job. Offering friendship to aliens he'd never met was just being polite." Chirp clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. "He said humans had to learn cooperation and mutual aid to survive on their death world. But the way he acted, it seemed automatic, like he couldn't even consider not helping." "Exactly," Professor Zethkar replied, his crystal body beginning to glow brighter as his excitement grew. "The behaviors we've classified as legendary heroism are simply normal human social responses. They don't see themselves as heroes. They just see other beings who might need help. Petal rustled her leaves as she spoke. When he showed us pictures of his family, he included creatures from his planet that weren't even his species. Dogs, cats, even that wild one he called Bandit. He formed emotional bonds with them just because they existed near him. And he invited me to contact him if I needed to talk, Lyra added, her crystal body glowing with warm colors. A complete stranger from a different species, and he offered friendship just because I had been upset. Professor Zethkar walked to his holographic display and activated the images of humans he had been showing earlier. But now, instead of looking at mythical creatures from ancient stories, he was looking at documentation of Jake Collins and his species. Students, I believe we need to completely revise our understanding of what it means to be human, he announced. The legends didn't exaggerate their abilities. If anything, the legends failed to capture the most important aspect of human nature. Whisper condensed further and asked, "What aspect is that, Professor?" "Their fundamental assumption that everyone deserves kindness," Professor Zethkar replied. Jake didn't help Lyra because she was Vothorian or because he expected something in return. He helped her because she was in distress, and to him, that was sufficient reason. He didn't fix our air system because he was ordered to or because it benefited him. He did it because we needed clean air and he had the ability to provide it. The professor began pacing in front of the class, his crystal body flickering with the excitement of discovery. For decades we've studied human legends as examples of impossible heroism. Warriors who would fight against hopeless odds, explorers who would venture into deadly territory, individuals who would sacrifice themselves for strangers. We assumed these were metaphorical stories designed to teach moral lessons. He gestured toward the door where Jake had exited. But we've just met a perfectly ordinary human, a maintenance worker doing routine repairs, and he displayed every single legendary trait as casual, everyday behavior. This suggests that what we've been calling impossible heroism is simply how humans interact with the world. A young Crick student who had been quiet throughout the encounter finally spoke up. "Professor, if humans are really like this, what does it mean for galactic civilization?" "Most species cooperate with their own kind and remain neutral toward others. But humans seem to cooperate with everyone automatically." Professor Zethkar considered this carefully. "It means that humans might represent something entirely new in galactic evolution. Most species developed intelligence as a tool for survival in competition with other species. Humans seem to have developed intelligence as a tool for cooperation with other species. But is that sustainable?" asked another student. "Won't other species take advantage of human generosity?" "Perhaps," Professor Zethkar admitted. "But consider Jake's approach. He helped everyone he encountered, but he also solved problems efficiently and made friends easily. His cooperative nature didn't make him weak, it made him effective." Lyra raised one of her crystal arms. "Professor, should we tell other people about this, about meeting a real human?" Professor Zethkar thought about this question seriously. "We should tell everyone. But more importantly, we should think about what we learned from Jake about how to interact with other species. He treated each of us as individuals worthy of respect and kindness, regardless of our appearance or origin. Perhaps that's a lesson we can all apply." The soft chime of the university's time system indicated that the class period was ending. Students began gathering their materials, but the usual rush to leave was absent. Everyone seemed reluctant to end this extraordinary experience. As students filed out of the classroom, many of them were already discussing how they might apply Jake's approach to their own interactions with other species. The idea of default kindness and cooperation was spreading like ripples in a pond. Professor Zethkar remained behind, staring at his notes and trying to figure out how to restructure his entire curriculum. Tomorrow's class could no longer be about mythical creatures. It would need to be about understanding their human neighbors and perhaps learning from their example. He thought about Jake's final gesture, offering friendship to Lyra simply because she might need someone to talk to. It was such a small thing, but it perfectly embodied the human approach to social interaction. See a need, fill it. Meet a person, offer friendship. Encounter a problem, solve it. As Professor Zethkar prepared to leave his classroom, he realized that Jake Collins had accomplished something no academic theory or diplomatic protocol had ever achieved. In 30 minutes of casual conversation and basic maintenance work, he had demonstrated that cooperation between species wasn't just possible. It was natural. The professor's crystal body glowed with warm, hopeful colors as he considered the implications. If humans really were as naturally cooperative and protective as Jake had demonstrated, then perhaps the galaxy was about to become a much more interesting and compassionate place. Outside his window, Professor Zethkar could see maintenance tunnels, where Jake Collins was probably back to work, fixing air filters and solving problems with cheerful efficiency, completely unaware that he had just changed the course of interspecies relations forever. The age of humans in galactic civilization was just beginning, and it was going to be nothing like anyone had expected.